So I don't know about you guys, but I used to love creepypastas. I would listen to audio recordings of them and spend hours in my room at night with the lights off just listening to story after story. It was so much fun. I haven't read a whole lot of creepypastas lately, so I thought I'd go back and revisit some of my old favorites and see if they still held up. Maybe you like the same ones I did, or maybe this is your first time reading them. Either way, I would love to see what everyone else thinks of them. But if you're completely new to creepypastas, you might be wondering just what they are. It's kind of a funny word, creepypasta. The best way I can explain them is that they're kind of like internet urban legends. They're similar to stories you'd tell around a campfire or maybe at a sleepover, but instead of being spread via word of mouth, they're spread over the internet. If stories like that sound interesting to you and you want to know more about the ones I like, then keep on watching. Number 1, wake up. So I'm just going to read this one to you verbatim because not only is it really short, but you kind of need to see the words on screen to get the point. There are several different versions of it floating around, so I'm going to go with the one that I think is the least likely to get me in trouble with YouTube. It has been reported that some victims of torture during the act would retreat into a fantasy world from which they could not wake up. In this catatonic state, the victim lived in a world just like their normal one, except they weren't being tortured. The only way that they realized they needed to wake up was a note they found in their fantasy world. It would tell them about their condition and tell them to wake up. Even then, it would often take months until they were ready to discard their fantasy world and please wake up. Do you get it? You get it? Wake up definitely has more of an effect the first time you read it because you don't have any idea what's going on. So if this was your first time hearing it, let me know what you thought. Number 2, the portraits. A hunter has had a long day in the woods and stops at a nearby cabin for the night. But as often happens in these stories, things are far worse than they appear. This is another super short story with a twist ending. And this ending is just as creepy and shocking this time around as it was the first and even second and third and fourth times. Definitely take a couple of minutes to go read this one in its entirety. Number 3, the girl in the photograph. A young boy finds a picture of a beautiful girl and becomes entranced by it. But the girl in the photograph has something sinister in mind for him. This is another really short pasta that packs a punch with its twist ending. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then definitely go check it out for yourself. By the way, when I say short, I mean short. These 3 pastas we've talked about so far will take you about a collective 5 minutes to read. That's all 3 of them put together. It's basically horror flash fiction. Number 4, lightning. A single dad moves into a new home with his young son, but it's not the ideal home he expected. In this story, which is also very short, the horror comes more from a real-world problem than a supernatural one. So if that sounds more like your thing, then you should read it. By the way, I'm not a parent, but if you are, this one might be more disturbing to you, so just keep that in mind. Number 5, White with Red. White with Red is somewhat of a haunted hotel story, but with a different, more shocking twist. There are some elements of this story that don't make a whole lot of sense, but I really don't think that matters. Like a lot of short horror, it really packs a punch at the ending, but if you've read this one before, it might not have as much of an effect the second time. Still, if you've never read it, or if it's been a while and you don't remember it, then I recommend it. Number 6, Candle Cove. Candle Cove takes place entirely inside a chat room where a group of adults are discussing an old children's show they used to watch. As the story progresses, their descriptions of the show and its characters get more and more bizarre until the twist ending. Yeah, there are a lot of twist endings in creepypastas. This is another classic pasta that's even gotten mainstream attention. It was the basis of the first season of the Sci-Fi Channel show Channel Zero. The story itself is also pretty well written. It sounds almost exactly like a message board conversation I might have had back in the day. And its corresponding season of Channel Zero is really good too, so if you can find that, I would recommend watching it. Number 7, the Rugrats theory. You remember the show Rugrats, right? Well, what if I told you the entire show was a figment of the imagination of Angelica, one of the major characters? And what if I told you most of what you saw on screen actually came from her drug-ridden mind? Okay, this obviously wasn't what the creators had in mind, but it sounds pretty disturbing, right? There are a lot of these theory pastas out there that give new dark takes on classic children's shows, but since Rugrats was my favorite show growing up, this is the one I always gravitated toward. I haven't watched much Rugrats lately, but when I do, I sometimes think of this pasta and it kind of makes you see it in a different light. Some people would see that as ruining their childhood, and I do understand that, but that just wasn't really the case for me. Number 8, the expressionless. In 1972, a mysterious woman entered a Los Angeles hospital. To this day, she's never been identified or seen again. And the strangest part? She wasn't exactly human. She appeared more like a mannequin and did some pretty sinister things during her brief hospital stay. Looking back on this one, there are elements of it that are kind of cheesy. Actually, that's not true. I even knew they were cheesy when I first read it. But I do still see the appeal. It takes place more than 40 years ago, giving it an air of mystery since we still don't know exactly what happened. We still have no idea who this woman is, why she behaved the way she did, or why she said, "I am God," when asked who she was. I remember reading a comment years ago speculating that this woman was supposed to be Satan, since Satan is the father of lies, so obviously he would lie about being God. Kind of made me see the story in a different way. The expressionless isn't perfect, but I still think it's worth the read. Number 9, Mr. Widemouth. In Mr. Widemouth, an adult looking back on his childhood recalls one of his imaginary friends. One that might not be so imaginary or friendly. I think this is a story that benefits from being written down rather than in any visual format. That way, the reader's visualization of Mr. Widemouth is left largely up to their imagination. All we know is that various parts of his face, especially his mouth, are unusually large, and that he looks kind of like a Furby, as the narrator puts it. Okay, that is kind of specific, but I still don't think Mr. Widemouth would be as creepy if you saw him on a screen, because that element of fear would already be ruined from the beginning. There are a lot of pastas that have this format of an adult narrator looking back on a terrifying event in their childhood. It's usually hard to make them suspenseful because you know the narrator will survive, but for the most part, this one works. I'm pretty sure it was one of the first pastas to do this, or at least one of the first ones that got really popular, so maybe people didn't know what to expect. It's not my favorite of these old pastas, but I think it's still worth a read. Number 10, If You Lost a Loved One. I think this is the only one on the list that wouldn't really be considered a classic, but I still love it. If You Lost a Loved One is from a subgenre known as ritual pastas. They're basically just what they sound like. They describe a ritual that you can do and you get something out of it that you want, but at a price. This one tells you how to resurrect someone in a sense, complete with creepy apparitions and of course, lots of emotion since you are bringing back someone you love who has died. I still think this particular one is super creepy. There aren't a lot of stories anymore that feature the restless but dangerous dead. Looking back now, this story was actually pretty influential in my own writing. We all probably have someone we love who we wouldn't mind seeing one last time. Would it be worth it to do something like this if it was real? By the way, another really good ritual pasta is called 11 Miles. I've read it multiple times over the years, and I can't believe I forgot about it until I'd already compiled this list. Definitely go check it out. By the way, I'm probably going to make a page on my website where I put all of these links and sources just to keep the description from getting too messy, and then I will leave a link to that page in the description, so look for that. Number 11, The Devil Game. The Devil Game is another ritual pasta, one that involves summoning the devil, asking him questions, and answering some of his. Now, if you think having a conversation with the devil sounds risky, you're probably smart enough not to attempt this. But if you do it and manage to outsmart the devil and are willing to make some sacrifices, you might find out some important information you wouldn't have known otherwise. That is, assuming you believe the father of lies is being honest with you. I think a lot of the appeal of these ritual pastas is that most of them are in a second person. Not only does this feel more personal, but the description of the protagonist, you, is usually left pretty vague, allowing almost anyone to insert themselves into the story. They also describe rituals with very high risks, usually things like death or damnation if you fail. But if you succeed, the rewards are also very high. I'm sure a lot of people out there find some of these rituals cheesy or nonsensical, and some of them are, but I still really enjoy this particular one, even if it is a lot longer than the ones I normally read. By the way, if you want to see me fumble my way through one of these rituals, check out my video on Daruma-san, where I try to summon a vengeful ghost girl. I will leave that linked up in the cards and down below. Number 12, Smile Dog. This pasta is eerily similar to the movie The Ring, with a cursed object killing whoever sees it. But in this story, it's a creepy photograph of a smiling dog, and instead of killing you outright, it makes you go insane until you take your own life. This was by far my favorite of the old classic creepypastas, but I think I liked the idea of it more than the actual story, and that photograph. Tell me that is not the creepiest picture you've ever seen. I legit used to be afraid of waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom because I was afraid I would see this stupid dog at the end of my bed smiling at me and damning me to my fate. And it's not like I was a little kid or anything. I was already an adult by this point, so there was really no excuse. But the story itself isn't bad either. It has that element of mystery to it, and in the original story, the photo is posted on some random message board, giving the impression that you never know what sort of horrifying things you could come across on the internet. The photo also later circulates via chainmail, which is a concept I talked a lot about in my video on Carmen Winstead, which I will also link somewhere around here for you to easily find. If you've got a spare 15 minutes or so, Smile Dog could be a great one to visit or revisit. So those are all of the creepypastas I have for you today. I might do another video in the future with some of the other ones I really enjoyed but weren't quite my favorites. I was really surprised at how many of these old pastas still hold up. I was fully expecting to revisit them and wonder whatever made me think they were good in the first place, but I guess they were popular for a reason. As a horror author myself, I really admire the talent of some of these writers. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and share it. And for more dark content, I hope you'll consider subscribing and hitting that bell. Let me know some of your favorite creepypastas in the comments below. I know there are tons of classics I left out because I could just never really get into them. Thanks for watching and have a creepy day. Bye guys.